My name is Marcus Chen, and I used to work nights at St. Mary's Medical Center in Whitefish, Montana. I say used to because what I experienced there changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the spaces between them. After 2 tours in Afghanistan and a medical discharge for PTSD, I thought I'd seen the worst that existence could offer. I was wrong. Some buildings hold on to their ghosts tighter than they should, and some floors are sealed off for reasons that have nothing to do with fire damage. I took the security job at St. Mary's in October 2021, desperate for work that wouldn't trigger my anxiety. $12 an hour to walk empty hallways with a flashlight seemed perfect. Quiet, predictable, safe. The hospital sat on Whitefish's edge, like a pale yellow brick monument to small-town healthcare, built in 1952 and showing its age in every creaking floorboard and flickering fluorescent light. My supervisor, Janet Kowalski, had worked there since the Carter administration. On my first night, she showed me the layout. Basement storage, first floor emergency and admissions, second floor general medicine, third floor ICU. Then she stopped at the elevator. Fourth floor's been sealed since '87, she said, pressing the button for 3. I noticed there was no button for 4. Fire killed 12 patients and 2 nurses. Administration decided it was cheaper to seal it than renovate. Her look suggested this wasn't her first time having this conversation. Doors locked, stairwells chained. Nothing up there but bad memories. The first week went exactly as promised. I'd start at 11 p.m., do walkthroughs, then settle into the security office to monitor cameras and work on online college courses. 3 rounds per night, 3 a.m., 5 a.m., 7 a.m. Most nights, I barely saw another human being. It was perfect, until it wasn't. Problems started my second week. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., I'd hear the elevator ding, not the soft chime of normal operation, but the sharp metallic sound of someone pressing the call button. The indicator panel would show the car stopped on the 4th floor, the floor without a button, the floor that was supposed to be sealed. Maintenance found nothing wrong during day shift inspections. Must be an electrical glitch, they'd say. But it happened every single night. 3:17 a.m., like clockwork. By week 3, the patient call system joined the chaos. Call lights would activate for rooms that hadn't existed since 1987. Room 401, Room 407, Room 4015. The computer logged them as active calls, complete with timestamps, but the night nurses just shook their heads. "System glitch," they'd mutter. But I knew what I was hearing during my rounds. The rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, the mechanical wheeze of ventilators, coming from directly above the 3rd floor. I'd spent enough time in military hospitals to recognize those sounds. The night staff's standard response became a mantra. Old buildings make weird noises, Marcus. Week 4 brought sleeplessness that felt different from my usual PTSD insomnia. My body rejected rest because it knew I needed to stay alert. Even at home, miles from the hospital, I'd hear that elevator ding at 3:17 a.m. Sleeping pills made it worse. The sounds became more vivid, more real. I dreamed of walking through corridors that didn't exist, checking on patients who called my name from rooms that had burned away decades ago. During research breaks, I dug into the 1987 fire. It started in room 417 at exactly 3:17 a.m., when elderly patient Harold Morrison knocked over a space heater. The fire spread quickly through the East Wing. 12 patients died from smoke inhalation. 2 nurses, Patricia Wells and Mary Catherine Hughes, died evacuating the last patients from rooms 415 and 419. The surviving staff reports made my skin crawl. Several witnesses saw patients and nurses in rooms that had already been evacuated. Security footage showed figures moving through smoke-filled corridors long after the official evacuation. The footage was dismissed as camera artifacts, but I watched it frame by frame. I swear I could see faces in that smoke. Other night staff started avoiding me. I was becoming obsessed, asking too many questions about events from before most of them were hired. Janet pulled me aside during week 5, asking if I was adjusting well. I lied and said everything was fine, but concern showed in her eyes. She'd probably had this conversation before. That's when I found the master key in her office, sitting on her desk, labeled 4th floor, emergency access only, in her careful handwriting. I stared at it for 30 seconds, knowing I should leave it alone, knowing some doors are locked for good reasons. But the sleeplessness and constant questions made the decision for me. I palmed the key and walked out like nothing happened. I waited until 3:17 a.m. on a Friday night. The elevator dinged on schedule, indicator showing it waiting on the 4th floor. I took the stairs. The chains that should have blocked the stairwell hung loose, like someone had unlocked them from inside. The door opened too easily with the master key, as if it had been used recently. The 4th floor was a time capsule, burned but not destroyed. The east wing was blackened walls and melted ceiling tiles, but the structure remained. More importantly, it wasn't empty. Fresh medical supplies sat on gurneys. 4 bags hung beside beds that should have been cleared decades ago. Heart monitors beeped steadily in rooms where patients should have been evacuated in 1987. I walked the corridor with my flashlight, checking room numbers. 401, 403, 405. Each room had a patient. Not solid patients, but detailed enough that I could make out hospital gowns, oxygen masks, IV lines. All elderly, all lying still, all staring at the ceiling with eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like mirrors. Room 417 was at the corridor's end, Harold Morrison's, room where the fire started. Light came from under the door, not electric light, but the warm, flickering glow of flames that weren't consuming anything. Marcus. Someone called my name calmly, conversationally, like a nurse trying to get my attention. It came from inside, room 417. Marcus, we've been waiting for you. Every combat instinct screamed at me to run, but I needed answers. After weeks of questions and sleepless nights, I had to know what was behind that door. Harold Morrison sat up in bed, oxygen mask around his neck, looking at me with patient expectation. The space heater that started the fire glowed cheerfully in the corner, casting dancing shadows. He looked exactly like his memorial photo downstairs. "You're the new security guard," Harold said, his voice coming from very far away. "Patricia and Mary Catherine have been asking about you." The 2 nurses stepped from the shadows, looking like their staff photos except their uniforms were clean and pressed, hair perfectly styled. They smiled with professional warmth. "We've been trying to get your attention," Patricia said. "The call buttons, the elevator. We need help with the patients." "They're dying," Mary Catherine added. "Every night at 3:17 they all die again. We try to save them, but we need someone from outside to help us understand what went wrong." A clipboard sat on Harold's bedside table, a patient chart with my name on it. Marcus Chen, admitted 3:17 a.m., November 15th, 2021. Under diagnosis, terminal curiosity. Under treatment plan, patient refuses to leave. Recommend permanent admission to 4th floor staff. "We tried to warn you," Harold said. "The elevator, the call lights, the sounds. But you had to know, didn't you?" I dropped the clipboard and ran. The hallway stretched forever, rooms numbered in hundreds, then thousands. Every door was open. Every room had a patient calling my name. "Marcus, we need help. Marcus, don't leave us alone. Marcus, you're one of us now." I found the stairwell by following exit signs that kept relocating themselves. Behind me, footsteps approached. Not running, just the steady, measured pace of medical professionals making rounds. I burst through the emergency exit, setting off alarms that brought night staff running. They found me in the parking lot, hyperventilating about patients who shouldn't exist, and nurses dead for 30 years. I refused the ER, just wanted to go home. I resigned the next morning. Janet didn't seem surprised. She asked if I wanted to talk about what happened, but her expression told me she already knew. The 4th floor has always been problematic, she said, taking my badge and keys. Some buildings hold on to things. People, memories, unfinished business. Administration prefers to think of it as sealed off, but that's not accurate. It's more like contained. 3 months later, Janet called. They'd hired a new night guard, young military veteran, just like me. He was asking questions about the 4th floor. The elevator was acting up again. I told Janet to give him my number, to warn him about curiosity and master keys. But I knew he wouldn't listen, just like I hadn't. When you work nights in empty buildings and hear sounds that shouldn't exist, there's only so long you can convince yourself it's imagination. The 4th floor is still waiting. Patients still die at 3:17 a.m. In room 417, there's a clipboard with a new name, a new diagnosis of terminal curiosity, and a treatment plan that begins with one word: stay. I still wake at 3:17 a.m. sometimes, swearing I hear that elevator ding 12 miles from St. Mary's. Some sounds follow you home. Some ghosts don't need buildings to haunt. And sometimes, when the night is quiet, I hear Patricia and Mary Catherine calling my name, asking why I left them alone, asking when I'm coming back to finish my shift. I never answer. But I kept that master key. It sits in my desk drawer next to discharge papers and my old security badge, waiting for the night when 3:17 a.m. passes without that elevator ding. And I realize the only way to make the sound stop is to go back and finish what I started. Some doors, once opened, can never really be closed again. They say the desert highway shows you things that aren't there, especially driving alone at 2 a.m., with nothing but sagebrush and stars for company. I used to think that was trucker folklore. But I've hauled freight across Interstate 80 through Nevada for 15 years, and I know some stretches of road hold on to more than tire marks and roadkill. Some highways collect souls, and if you let your guard down for one moment of human compassion, they'll collect yours too. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, though most folks on the CB know me as Big Rig. I've been driving 18-wheelers since my divorce at 26, when I needed distance from my Houston ex-husband, while supporting 2 kids. 15 years later, I've driven every major highway in America, hauled everything from auto parts to livestock, survived every weather condition imaginable. 2 million miles without a single accident, and I can back a 53-foot trailer into spaces tighter than most people park a Honda. I'm telling you this, so you understand, I'm not some rookie spooked by shadows and mirages. I know fatigue hallucinations from reality. I know when my mind plays tricks versus when something genuinely doesn't belong. What happened on Interstate 80 between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain falls into that second category. My monthly Sacramento to Denver electronics run took me straight across Nevada's most desolate country. Stretches where you won't see another vehicle for 40 miles, where cell phones become useless plastic, where the nearest town might as well be on Mars. Most drivers hated that run, but I preferred the isolation. It gave me time to think, listen to audiobooks, enjoy silence you can't find anywhere else. I always drove that stretch at night to avoid desert heat. Summer Nevada temperatures hit 120, hell on engines and AC systems. But at night, especially early morning hours, the desert became almost peaceful. Temperature dropped to the 70s. Stars scattered like diamonds, headlights cutting through darkness for miles. September 2021, About 2 hours out of Winnemucca, my headlights picked up something wrong. There, beside mile marker 127, stood a woman in a white dress. Not modern style, but something from the 1980s. Long sleeves, high neckline, formal like wedding or church attire. She faced the road, thumb extended in the universal hitchhiking gesture. My first instinct was stopping. I have 2 daughters. The thought of either stranded on a deserted highway makes my blood freeze. But trucker safety protocol is clear. No picking up strangers, especially nowhere, especially 2:30 a.m. Too many drivers robbed, assaulted, or worse by harmless-looking people. I slowed as I passed, got a good look, kept driving. She appeared mid-20s, blonde ponytail, pale skin glowing in my headlights. She didn't wave frantically or run toward my truck like most stranded motorists. Just stood there, thumb out, watching my rig pass with an unreadable expression. Guilt ate at me for 50 miles. Someone obviously needed help, and I'd driven past like she was invisible. I planned to call it in at Battle Mountain, let state police know about the stranded motorist. But by town, I'd convinced myself she was probably gone, picked up by another driver, or maybe just a mirage from tired eyes and heat rising off asphalt. That I-80 stretch isn't just desolate, it's actively hostile. No gas stations, rest areas, civilization for 45 miles either direction. Nearest town is Valmy, population 50, 20 miles south on a dirt road most vehicles can't handle. Breaking down at mile marker 127 means a very long, very dangerous walk. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. The next month, running the same route on nearly identical schedule, I found myself thinking about her as I approached that highway stretch. October in Nevada, clear skies, perfect conditions. Mile marker 125, 126, then there she was again. Same woman, same white dress, same position beside marker 127, same time, 2:30 a.m. according to my dashboard. This time, I paid closer attention, slowing way down. Definitely the same person. Blonde ponytail, pale skin, 1980s dress. But when my headlights hit her, she turned to look directly at me. Our eyes met through my windshield, and something cold crawled up my spine. Her expression was profoundly sad. Not desperate or angry, just sad, like someone waiting for something that might never come. I drove past again, but this time noticed my surroundings. No broken down vehicles anywhere. No tire tracks in desert sand. No indication how she'd gotten there or where she came from. Just a woman in white, standing nowhere, asking for a ride. I called Nevada State Police from Battle Mountain. Reported stranded motorist at mile marker 127. Gave description. Suggested they check it out. The dispatcher took information, but I heard skepticism in her voice. She'd probably fielded dozens of similar calls from tired truckers seeing things. November brought my third encounter. I was almost expecting her, timing my run to hit that stretch at exactly 2:30 a.m., telling myself I was curious about pattern continuation. But when my headlights found her beside mile marker 127, something was different. She was covered in blood, not just a little, drenched in it. Her white dress stained red from neckline down, dark streaks on face and arms. Still in the same position, thumb extended, but swaying slightly like someone who'd lost too much blood and struggled staying upright. I hit brakes harder than I should have, trailer fishtailing before I regained control. Every instinct screamed to stop, help, call ambulance. This wasn't someone needing a ride. This was someone actively dying. But as I slowed and started pulling onto the shoulder, something in my mind hesitated. How does someone get blood-covered then stand calmly roadside thumbing rides? Where was her vehicle? Where was the accident scene? And why? Exactly the same spot, same time, 3 months running? I drove past again, watching mirrors. The moment my taillights disappeared around the curve, she vanished. Not walking away or moving toward desert, just gone, like she'd never existed. That's when I started researching. Battle Mountain Public Library had internet and decent newspaper archives back to the 1970s. I spent mandatory rest periods digging through records, looking for anything explaining what I was seeing. Missing persons, accident reports, anything connected to mile marker 127. I found Jenny Morrison in the November 15th, 1987 Battle Mountain Bugle. 23 years old, blonde hair, last seen driving eastbound on Chiwetel after a Reno wedding. Her white 1984 Honda Accord was found 3 days later in a ravine quarter-mile south of mile marker 127. Jenny's body was never recovered. Official cause: driver fatigue, with contributing blood loss from crash injuries. The newspaper included a wedding photo. Jenny wore a white dress with long sleeves and high neckline, blonde hair in a neat ponytail. She looked exactly like the woman I'd been seeing. December brought the fourth encounter. I was ready this time, bringing a charged digital camera for proof. But when I reached mile marker 127 at 2:30 a.m., Jenny wasn't alone. She stood 20 feet ahead of my truck, right in the middle of the eastbound lane. I slammed brakes to avoid hitting her, rig shuddering to a stop. I saw her clearly for the first time. Not solid? I could see road through her, edges shimmering like heat waves. But real enough that I almost killed her, or she almost killed me. That's when I noticed the others. More figures stood along both highway sides. Men in trucker uniforms from different decades. Women in business attire. A family with small children. All transparent. All watching with the same sad expression I'd seen on Jenny's face. Behind them, scattered through desert as far as headlights reached, were vehicles. Dozens of them. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, RVs, spanning automotive history decades. All crashed, burned, or destroyed. All invisible until Jenny forced me to stop. I grabbed my CB radio, calling for help, getting only static. Then, cutting through white noise, I heard voices, faint, distorted, but clearly human calls for assistance. Breaker 19. This is westbound Willie. Situation at mile marker 127. My rig's on fire, and I can't get out. Mayday, this is Rebecca Chen in blue Camaro. Gone off-road at marker 127. Think my leg's broken. Anyone there? Frank Morrison in red pickup. Need help at 127. My daughter's trapped. Voices continued. Dozens calling for help from mile marker 127. Describing accidents spanning 40 years. I recognized names from my research. Drivers reported missing on Interstate 80. Passengers who never reached destinations. Families who vanished in Nevada desert. Jenny walked to my driver's window and tapped glass. When I rolled it down, she spoke for the first time. "Thank you for stopping," she said, voice coming from very far away. "I've been waiting so long for someone to stop." By February, Jenny appeared multiple times each run. Marker 125, then 127, then 130, then back to 127. Teleporting location to location, trying to get my attention, trying to make me stop. Other drivers commented on my behavior over CB radio. I'd slow for no reason, swerve avoiding invisible obstacles, brake suddenly on empty highway. They thought I had medical problems or was falling asleep. Several tried talking me into rest stops. But how do you explain avoiding a hitchhiking ghost, dead 35 years? Marlene at the pilot truck stop in Battle Mountain finally told me the truth. She'd worked night shift since Carter administration, heard every trucker story ever told. When I described my sightings, her face went white. "You need to stop driving that route," she said. "Jenny Morrison's been trying to get rides since 1987. Most drivers are smart enough to keep going. The ones who stop, well, they become part of the scenery. She told me about drivers found weeks later, crashed in the same ravine where Jenny's car was discovered. Their vehicles showed no mechanical problems, no driver error signs, no explanation for leaving the highway and plunging into desert. Official reports always listed driver fatigue or medical emergency, but Marlene knew better. "She's not evil," Marlene said. "Just lonely. Stuck there 35 years, watching cars pass, waiting for someone to care enough to stop. But once you pick her up, you become part of whatever happened that night. The desert doesn't let go of what it claims. Despite warnings, I couldn't take different routes. Monthly runs were good money, college tuition for my youngest. I told myself I'd keep driving past Jenny regardless of appearances or desperation. March 2022, 6 months after first seeing her, Jenny changed tactics. Approaching mile marker 127 at 2:30 a.m., she stepped directly into my headlight beams 50 feet ahead. Not roadside like before, but middle of eastbound lane, arms spread wide, forcing me to stop or run her down. I hit brakes, pulled onto shoulder, heart hammering. Jenny walked to my truck, opened the passenger door like it wasn't locked, climbed into the cab. "Thank you," she said, settling in and buckling her seatbelt. I've been waiting so long for someone to stop. Up close, she looked exactly like her newspaper photo except for blood covering her dress front, staining hands, matting blonde hair to forehead. But she smelled like desert sage and cold night air, not death or decay. "Where are you headed?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Denver. I was supposed to be there by morning. I'm already so late." I put the truck in gear, pulled back onto highway. What else could I do? She was clearly hurt, needed help, and regardless of supernatural weirdness, I couldn't leave her bleeding. But as we drove, things didn't make sense. Mile markers went backwards. 127, 126, 125. Though we traveled east. My dashboard clock stuck at 2:30 a.m., second-hand frozen. Outside windows, the same desert stretch repeated endlessly, like driving through a highway loop that never ended. "I was at my cousin's wedding in Reno," Jenny said, staring through the windshield. "Beautiful ceremony. I caught the bouquet." She held up blood-stained white roses. I was so happy, thinking about my own wedding, the man I'd marry, the life we'd have. Mile marker 127 appeared again, though we'd passed it 5 minutes earlier. "What happened, Jenny?" I got sleepy. So late, I'd been dancing all night. Such a long drive ahead. I thought I could make Denver without stopping, but the road curved. I overcorrected. Then I was flying. Then waiting. Mile markers kept repeating. 127, 126, 125. We were trapped in a loop, driving the same 10-mile stretch, while the clock stayed frozen at 2:30 a.m. 35 years, Jenny said. Watching cars drive past, drivers seeing me and deciding I'm not worth the risk. Do you know what that feels like? Being invisible, forgotten, having people see you and choose to pretend you don't exist? I looked in mirrors, seeing dozens of ghostly vehicles following in perfect formation. The drivers I'd heard on CB radio, missing persons from research, people claimed by mile marker 127 over decades. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Jenny said. "I just want to reach Denver, finish my trip. But everyone who stops gets lost too. They become part of the waiting. I don't want to wait. I have daughters, a life. So did we." Jenny gestured toward the ghostly convoy. "So did all of us. But we stopped to help someone needing help, and now we're trapped in the same moment, same road stretch, same night that never ends." Mile marker 127 appeared again. This time, I could see all the crashed vehicles scattered through desert. Decades of accidents. People who tried helping a stranded hitchhiker, and paid the ultimate price for compassion. "You have a choice," Jenny said. "Let me out here, drive away, never come back. Or join us, and we'll wait together for the next foolish driver who stops. If I let you out, then you drive away. I keep waiting. And the next person who stops faces the same choice. The cycle continues until someone decides to break it." I looked at the frozen dashboard clock. Fuel gauge still showing 3/4 full, the same level when Jenny got in. I looked at the convoy of lost souls following behind. "I'm sorry," I said, reaching to unlatch Jenny's seatbelt. "Sorry you've waited so long. Sorry this happened. But I can't stay." I pulled onto shoulder, opened passenger door. Jenny looked at me with those black water eyes. For a moment, I thought she'd argue, fight, drag me into whatever supernatural trap claimed those other drivers. Instead, she nodded. "I understand. I'd make the same choice." She paused at the door. "But Sarah, don't drive this route anymore. Find another way to Denver. Next time, I might not give you a choice." She closed the door, walked toward mile marker 127. The moment she stepped beyond my headlight range, the dashboard clock jumped from 2:30 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. Sun rose over eastern mountains, painting desert gold and red. The ghostly convoy vanished, and I was alone on empty highway with 4 hours of missing time and the smell of sage and roses in my cab. I don't drive Interstate 80 through Nevada anymore. I take I-70 through Utah instead. Adds 6 hours to Denver runs, but keeps me away from mile marker 127. Small sacrifice to avoid becoming part of Jenny Morrison's eternal wait for a ride to a destination she'll never reach. But I still think about her on clear desert nights, driving alone with only stars for company. 35 years of waiting, watching compassionate people drive past because they're too afraid to stop, too smart to risk their lives for a stranger. Jenny Morrison is still waiting at mile marker 127. She'll be there tonight, tomorrow night, every night after, until someone else makes the mistake of thinking they can save her. The desert keeps what it claims, and some ghosts are too lonely to let go of the living. If you ever find yourself on Interstate 80 through Nevada in early morning hours, and you see a woman in white beside mile marker 127 with her thumb extended, do me a favor. Keep driving. Don't look back. Don't feel guilty. Don't convince yourself you're strong or smart enough to help without becoming part of her story. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and mile marker 127 is where those intentions go to die. I used to believe caring for elderly people was one of the most noble professions you could choose. There's something beautiful about being there for someone in their final years, ensuring they feel valued and remembered. I thought death, when natural, was just another part of life's cycle. But my time working nights at Pinewood Manor in Millfield, Ohio, changed everything. I learned some places don't just house the dying, they harvest them. And sometimes, the people you think you're caring for have been dead longer than anyone wants to admit. My name is David Hawkins. 18 months ago, I was a certified nursing aide working graveyard shift at Pinewood Manor Assisted Living. I took that job after CNA certification, partly because night shift paid $3 more per hour, but mostly because I had bills and a sick mother whose medical expenses consumed my savings faster than I could replenish them. Pinewood Manor sits on Millfield's outskirts, housed in what used to be the Whitmore family mansion. Built in 1889 by a railroad baron wanting to display wealth ostentatiously, it's 3 stories of Victorian architecture, with turrets, wraparound porches, and gingerbread trim, making it look like a fairy tale structure. Conversion from residence to assisted living happened in 1987. While developers maintained historical character, the result was awkward marriage between modern medical necessity and 19th century design. Wide hallways accommodated wheelchairs, but featured original hardwood floors and ornate crown molding. Patient rooms carved from former bedrooms, sitting rooms, libraries created odd mixes of institutional functionality and domestic charm. The facility housed 34 residents across 3 floors. Main level contained common areas, dining room, activity room, offices, plus 8 resident rooms for relatively mobile people. Second floor had 12 rooms for those needing more daily assistance. Third floor housed 14 rooms requiring intensive care or memory support. Then there was the basement level, euphemistically called the garden level. According to facility director Mrs. Henderson, the garden level had been closed since 2019 for ongoing renovations. Official story involved updating electrical systems and installing new HVAC equipment, but timelines kept getting pushed back due to funding issues and structural complications. Residents weren't allowed down there. Day staff claimed no access, and the whole basement stayed locked behind a heavy door marked Authorized Personnel Only. During first week orientation, I met residents I'd care for overnight. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson in room 12 was 87, a former librarian with sharp wit and vintage mystery novel collections she'd read to anyone willing to listen. Mr. Stanley Kowalski in room 18 was a retired Cleveland steelworker, spending waking hours on jigsaw puzzles and neighborhood stories. Mrs. Linda Chen in room 23 was a retired music teacher, still playing piano during evening social hours, arthritic fingers coaxing beautiful melodies from the old parlor upright. These weren't just patients. They were people with rich histories, fascinating stories, genuine warmth making work feel like visiting extended family. Mrs. Patterson saved me dinner cookies, asked about college courses. Mr. Kowalski taught systematic puzzle approaches, starting with edges and working inward. Mrs. Chen played requests during quiet moments, preferring old jazz standards, filling Victorian hallways with music from another era. Night shift was supposed to be straightforward. Most residents slept through the night, occasionally waking for bathroom assistance or medication. My duties included hourly wellness checks, responding to call lights, helping with transfers, maintaining detailed logs of each resident's condition and incidents during my shift. The work was quiet, contemplative, exactly the peaceful environment I needed after nursing school stress and my mother's health crisis. For the first month, everything went perfectly. I felt like I'd found my calling, making real difference in vulnerable people's lives. Residents appreciated having someone young and energetic on night shift, willing to listen to stories and treat them as individuals rather than medical conditions. I started staying late to chat with Mrs. Patterson about books, help Mr. Kowalski with challenging puzzles, listen to Mrs. Chen play one more song before bedtime. I should have noticed the pattern sooner, paid attention to how other staff avoided discussing previous night aids, how Mrs. Henderson's smile strained whenever I asked about facility history. But I was new, eager to please, genuinely happy to have found meaningful work. That naive optimism lasted exactly 37 days. Mrs. Patterson died on a Tuesday night in November, during my second month. I found her during 3 a.m. wellness check, lying peacefully with a slight smile, as if she'd died dreaming something pleasant. Her vital signs had been normal during previous rounds, and she'd seemed in good spirits with evening medications. The on-call doctor classified it natural causes, cardiac arrest during sleep, common in patients her age and condition. What bothered me wasn't her death. I understood death was inevitable in geriatric care. What bothered me was what she clutched in her right hand, something day shift nurses hadn't mentioned. When I gently opened her fingers to prepare her body for the funeral home, I found an old brass key, tarnished with age and warm as if held for hours. I asked Mrs. Henderson about the key the next day, but she dismissed it as probably a memento from Mrs. Patterson's house or late husband's business. She suggested placing it with other personal effects, but something about the key's weight, the way it seemed to pulse with its own heat, made me hesitate. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and forgot about it until home. Mr. Kowalski and Mrs. Chen died the same night in December, both during my shift, both between 3 and 4 a.m. I found Mr. Kowalski first, slumped over his latest jigsaw puzzle, a 1,000-piece landscape he'd worked on for weeks. Mrs. Chen had apparently gotten out of bed and reached the main parlor piano, where she was found sitting on the bench, hands positioned over keys, as if playing one final song. Both deaths were ruled natural causes, but timing felt wrong. 2 residents dying the same night, same exact hour when I should be making rounds. Both found in positions suggesting they'd been active right before death. Day staff offered condolences and reminded me that death clustering was common in assisted living facilities, especially during winter, when residents were more susceptible to respiratory infections and seasonal depression. But I started noticing other things that didn't fit official explanations. Remaining residents began asking me to check on people not listed on my assignment sheet. Mrs. Morrison in room 7 would request I look in on Eleanor downstairs, even though Mrs. Patterson had died weeks earlier. Mr. Williams in room 15 wanted me to tell Stanley in the basement his puzzle piece fell under the bed, despite Mr. Kowalski being buried the previous Tuesday. Mrs. Garcia in room 21 insisted I bring Linda's sheet music down to B7, a room number not existing on any floor plan I'd seen. Initially, I attributed requests to confusion and grief. Elderly residents often struggled with friends' death reality, sometimes forgetting people had passed or imagining they remained present. But requests became more frequent and specific, all involving the supposedly closed for renovation basement level. David, dear, could you check on Mrs. Patterson? She's asking for mystery books, and I think she left them in B3. New residents downstairs are having sleep trouble. Could you bring herbal tea from the kitchen? Mr. Kowalski finished his puzzle, but can't find the box. It's in room B12, shelf by the window. The basement key from Mrs. Patterson's hand felt heavier in my pocket. During quiet shift moments, I'd examine it, noting intricate bow design, how it grew warm when held more than seconds. No identification number or manufacturer's mark, but style suggested it was original to the building, probably dating to the 1890s when the mansion was first constructed. I researched Pinewood Manor history during breaks, using facility Wi-Fi to dig through county records, newspaper archives, historical society documents. What I found made the key feel even heavier. The Whitmore family lived in the mansion from 1889 until 1952, when last surviving heir Margaret Whitmore died under mysterious circumstances. According to police reports, Margaret was found in the basement, apparently having fallen downstairs during the night. But witnesses reported she'd been terrified of the basement, claiming it was full of voices and refusing to go down there even during daylight. After Margaret's death, the mansion remained empty for 30 years. Several sale attempts failed when potential buyers reported strange occurrences during tours. Cold spots, unexplained sounds, persistent feeling of being watched. Conversion to assisted living finally happened in the 1980s. But even then, the project was plagued with problems. Construction workers complained about missing tools, unexplained equipment failures, and general unease whenever they worked in basement areas. Most disturbing information I found was in the facility's own records, accessed using Mrs. Patterson's old computer password. She'd shared it during late-night conversations about digital mystery novels. Between 2017 and 2019, Pinewood Manor experienced unusually high death rates, with over 60 residents passing during night shifts. Most died in basement-level rooms, all found by the same night aide, a young man named Martin Rodriguez, who'd started working there fresh from nursing school. Martin disappeared in March 2019. The same month, the basement level was officially closed for renovations. His employment file listed him as having resigned without notice, but there was no forwarding address, no final paycheck pickup, no references for future employment verification. Current residents weren't just asking me to check on basement people. They were describing interactions with residents, matching descriptions of people who died during Martin's tenure. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Kowalski, and Mrs. Chen weren't the first residents to die during my shifts. They were just the most recent additions to whatever was collecting souls in Pinewood Manor's basement. The brass key felt like it was burning through my pocket, but I was starting to understand it wasn't just a memento or coincidence. Mrs. Patterson had died holding that key because she'd wanted me to have it, because she'd known what was happening in the basement and tried to give me the means to understand it. Every night, resident requests became more urgent, specific, impossible to ignore. David, you need to go downstairs tonight. Mrs. Patterson is asking for you specifically. She says it's time you joined the permanent staff. The people in the basement are getting impatient. They've waited so long for someone to care for them properly. Martin tried to leave, but he couldn't abandon his patients. He's down there with them now, making sure they're comfortable. You'll like Martin. He's dedicated, just like you. I'd been losing weight without trying, sleeping poorly during days off, developing a persistent cough, reminding me of Mrs. Chen's final hours. My reflection in bathroom mirrors looked pale, drawn, like someone slowly wasting away from inside out. On Thursday night in January, during my 4th month at Pinewood Manor, Mrs. Morrison in room 7 made a request I couldn't ignore. David, dear, I know you've been worried about the basement, but Mrs. Patterson really needs her blanket. She's in room B7, and she's been so cold down there. Could you bring her the blue knitted blanket from her old room? She'd appreciate it so much. Mrs. Morrison had died 3 days earlier. I stood in the hallway outside room 7 at 3:33 a.m., staring at the door that should have been locked and empty, listening to a dead woman ask me to bring comfort items to other dead residents in a basement supposed to be sealed for renovations. The brass key in my pocket was so hot it began burning through my scrub fabric. I could have walked away, finished my shift, gone home, never returned to Pinewood Manor. I could have found another job, maybe day shift, where residents stayed properly dead, and basement levels didn't collect souls like Victorian-era charnel houses. But Mrs. Morrison was right about one thing. I was dedicated. I'd entered healthcare to help people, and if Mrs. Patterson was cold and needed her blanket, I was going to make sure she got it. I retrieved the blue knitted blanket from Mrs. Patterson's former room, now occupied by a new resident sleeping soundly through my late-night visit. The blanket still smelled like Mrs. Patterson's lavender perfume, still carried her presence warmth, even though she'd been gone over 2 months. The basement door was located at the main hallway's end, past administrative offices and staff break room. During my 4 months at Pinewood Manor, I'd walked past that door hundreds of times without much thought. It was just another locked room in a facility full of locked rooms, another off-limits area for someone with my access level. But now, standing before it at 3:33 a.m. with Mrs. Patterson's blanket in one hand and her brass key in the other, I could hear sounds coming from behind the wooden door. Not construction or renovation noise, but familiar sounds of an active nursing facility. Call lights chiming, footsteps in corridors, soft murmur of staff-resident conversations. The key fit perfectly, turning with smooth precision of a recently and regularly used mechanism. The basement door opened silently, on well-oiled hinges, revealing a staircase descending into warm, well-lit corridors. The garden level wasn't under renovation. It was fully operational, with patient rooms, lining both sides of a central hallway, nursing stations at regular intervals, all medical equipment necessary to provide round-the-clock care to residents requiring intensive support. The air was thick with disinfectant smell, and something else, something sweet and cloying, reminding me of flowers left too long in stagnant water. But it was also freezing cold, as if heating had been turned off for months, despite the appearance of active operation. Room B7 was at the east corridor's far end, and I could see light coming from under the door. Walking down the hallway, I passed other rooms, where I could see residents lying in beds, all staring at the ceiling with the same peaceful expression I'd seen on Mrs. Patterson's face the night she died. None moved when I passed their doorways, but I could see their chests rising and falling with slow, regular breathing. Mrs. Patterson sat up in bed in room B7, reading one of her mystery novels by bedside lamplight. She looked exactly as she had in life, except for her skin, which had taken on a translucent quality, making her seem made of pale wax. "David, dear, you brought my blanket," she said, setting down her book and smiling with genuine warmth. "I've been so cold down here. The heating system doesn't work properly in the basement." I draped the blue knitted blanket around her shoulders, and she sighed with contentment as warmth settled around her body. Her skin felt room temperature when my hands brushed her shoulders. Not cold like I'd expected, but not warm like living flesh either. "We've been waiting for you to join us on the permanent night shift," she said. "You're such a caring young man, and we have so many residents down here who need someone with your dedication." I looked around the room and noticed walls covered with photographs of residents I recognized. Not just Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Kowalski, and Mrs. Chen, but dozens of others, spanning decades of Pinewood Manor care. All elderly, all peaceful, all staring from their frames with the same translucent skin and calm expressions. "Martin is here too," Mrs. Patterson said, gesturing toward the doorway where a young man in scrubs stood watching us. He looked about my age, with dark hair and tired eyes, but his skin had the same waxy quality as Mrs. Patterson's. "He's been taking care of us since 2019, but he's been working alone so long. He needs help with night rounds." Martin stepped into the room and extended his hand for a shake. His grip was firm but cold, and when I looked into his eyes, I could see exhaustion of someone who'd been working the same shift for 5 years without a break. "Good to finally meet you, David," he said. "I've been watching your work upstairs, and you have exactly the compassion we need down here. These residents have been waiting so long for proper care." "Waiting for what?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "To move on," Mrs. Patterson said. "They're stuck between life and death, unable to let go because they're afraid of being forgotten, afraid of dying alone and unloved. They need someone to care for them during their transition, someone to ensure they're comfortable and valued as they take their final journey." I looked around again and realized the photographs weren't just pictures. They were windows. Behind the glass, I could see residents moving, reading, working on puzzles, playing piano. They were living some kind of half-life in those frames, sustained by care and attention of night aides recruited to serve them eternally. "The entity living in this basement feeds on the dying," Martin explained. "It's been here since the mansion was built, probably since before that. It draws elderly people to this place, sustains them in a state between life and death, and feeds on their gradual transition from one state to the other. But it needs human helpers, people who can provide emotional care and connection that pure feeding can't supply." "What happened to previous night aides?" I asked, afraid I already knew. "They joined us," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "Eventually, they all join us. The work is so important, so meaningful, They can't bear to leave these poor souls without proper care, and the entity rewards their dedication by making them part of the permanent staff. I looked at Martin more closely and realized he wasn't breathing. His chest wasn't rising and falling. His skin wasn't flushed with blood circulation, and his eyes had the glassy quality of someone looking at the world from great distance. "You've been losing weight, haven't you?" Martin asked. "Having trouble sleeping? Feeling weak and tired all the time? That's the entity beginning to prepare you for transition. It's been feeding on your life force gradually, the way it feeds on all potential night aids, until you're ready to join permanent staff." I touched my own face and felt how thin my cheeks had become, how pale my skin felt under fluorescent lights. I'd been slowly dying for months, consumed by the same force, sustaining all these residents in their liminal state between life and death. "You have a choice," Mrs. Patterson said. "Accept your position on permanent night shift, and we'll take good care of you just like you've cared for us. Or try to leave, and the entity will simply take what it needs by force. Either way, you belong to Pinewood Manor now." I looked at the basement around me. Rows of rooms filled with residents who would never truly die, tended by night aides who would never truly live, all sustained by something ancient and hungry that had found perfect hunting ground in a facility designed to house the dying. But suddenly, I remembered something from my research. The 1987 fire that had driven the Whitmore family away, that had ended their reign in this mansion. Fire was the one thing that had broken the entity's hold before. "I'm sorry," I said to Mrs. Patterson, backing toward the door. "I know you need care, and I know you're afraid of being alone. But I can't stay here. I have a mother who needs me, a life I haven't finished living." I ran from room B7, down the corridor past all the occupied rooms, up the stairs to the main level, and directly to the kitchen. The old gas stove had pilot lights that had been converted, but still had manual overrides. I turned on all the burners without lighting them, letting gas fill the basement level through the ventilation system. Then I found the emergency flare kit from the maintenance closet and headed back to the basement door. "David, don't do this," Martin's voice called from the stairwell. "These people need us. They've been waiting so long for someone to care." "Some people need to be allowed to rest," I said, and dropped the lit flare down the stairs. The explosion shook the entire building, setting off every alarm system. The basement filled with flames that somehow didn't spread to the upper floors, contained by the same supernatural force that had been trapping souls there for over a century. But this time, the fire was breaking the entity's hold instead of feeding it. I waited in the parking lot as fire departments arrived, watching flames pour from basement windows, while the rest of Pinewood Manor remained untouched. It took 6 hours to extinguish the fire, and when it was over, the basement level was completely gutted. They found the remains of 63 people in that basement, residents who had officially died and been buried over the past 30 years, but whose souls had been trapped in that liminal space. They also found Martin Rodriguez, finally at peace. I never went back to collect my final paycheck. Pinewood Manor was permanently closed after the fire, the building condemned due to structural instability. The remaining residents were transferred to other facilities, where they lived out their natural lives and died peaceful deaths. Mrs. Henderson disappeared the night of the fire and was never found. I work day shift at a different facility now, in a modern building with no basements and no history of supernatural activity. I sleep well at night. My weight has returned to normal, and I've never again felt that cold presence feeding on my life force. But I kept the brass key as a reminder of what I escaped. It sits in my desk drawer, no longer warm to the touch, no longer pulsing with malevolent energy. Just an old key that once opened a door to hell, now powerless, because the hell it accessed has finally been destroyed. The entity that fed in Pinewood Manor's basement is gone, consumed by the same fire that set free the souls it had been trapping for decades. The residents I cared for, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Kowalski, Mrs. Chen, and all the others, finally found the peace they'd been denied for so long. Sometimes I dream about them, but they're not the translucent, trapped versions I met in the basement. They're fully alive in my dreams, reading books, solving puzzles, playing music, finally free to exist in whatever comes after life, instead of being suspended in the terrible space between living and dying. Healthcare work is still a noble calling, but I learned that some forms of care become prisons, and some dedication becomes damnation. The dying deserve compassion, dignity, and the right to let go when their time comes. They don't deserve to be trapped in eternal servitude to something that feeds on their transition from life to death. If you ever find yourself working in a healthcare facility housed in an old building with a suspicious basement level, pay attention to the patterns. Notice if residents ask you to check on people who shouldn't be there. Notice if you start losing weight and feeling drained. Notice if previous night shift workers have a habit of disappearing without explanation. And if you ever find a brass key that grows warm in your pocket, remember that some doors are locked for very good reasons, and some keys are meant to stay buried with the people who died holding them. The basement of Pinewood Manor is now just a burned-out foundation filled with concrete, but the lesson it taught me remains. The greatest horror isn't death itself, but being prevented from dying when your time has come. Being trapped forever in service to something that sees your compassion as weakness to be exploited. True care sometimes means knowing when to let go, when to say goodbye, and when to allow the natural cycle of life and death to complete itself without interference from forces that would trap souls for their own hungry purposes. The residents of Pinewood Manor are finally at rest, and that's the greatest gift any caregiver can offer, the gift of a peaceful ending when the time comes to move on from this world to whatever lies beyond.